Hello and welcome to Always Bored, Never Boring. I am a bit of a HeroQuest fan, you may have noticed. I have a tendency to talk about it a fair bit. As part of that, on the channel I have been working through each of the quest books, taking a deep dive into the plots and the individual missions. The idea is to cast a critical eye on something I love, to review what I like, what I don't like, and in some cases what I might have done differently. Today I am looking at the Frozen Horror. This expansion first came out in 1992, but unlike Keller's Keep and Return of the Witchlord, it never had a European release. As I'm from the UK, when Avalon Hill announced Frozen Horror as part of their modern reissue of the HeroQuest game system, I was excited to finally get to play it, despite the many hot takes and horror stories I had heard regarding the difficulty. And make no mistake, this is a difficult expansion. This is HeroQuest dialed up to 11. If your heroes have started coasting through missions since the core set, Frozen Horror will upset the apple cart. That difficulty is indeed a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it's nice to give the heroes a real challenge, but at the same time, this is an expansion that can lean into being just a bit unfair, and there are times when the gameplay can start to drag as the heroes are forced to wade through hordes of surprisingly tough enemies. As such, this expansion, I would say, more than any other, benefits from a Zargon player who takes on the role of a dungeon master, identifying issues before they arise and making adjustments accordingly to keep gameplay brisk and to prevent frustration among the team. If the heroes are facing a Zargon player who just wants to win, they are going to have a very tough and potentially less fun time. To ameliorate this somewhat, Avalon Hill did publish an online quest with some additional rules called Into the Northlands. It's an opportunity to grab some extra equipment, and it introduces some extra items, plus rules that nerf the Yetis for solo play. This online quest was also the first introduction of the official variant rules for unthreatened movement, which lets heroes move without rolling dice whenever there are no monsters present. But enough about that, let's drill a hole in the ice and dive into the Frozen Horror. The story begins, like usual, with a message from Mentor. He welcomes the barbarian, who from dialogue we can assume is the same barbarian who took part in the adventure from the core set. He has been summoned by his tribe because the monstrous Frozen Horror has awoken. And here the writers lean as far into Saturday morning cartoons as they can without losing their balance. The Frozen Horror has acquired the scepter of Glacial majesty and has returned with it to his seat of power, the Ice Mountain. I'm sure that must be in the same neighbourhood as Snake Mountain. The tribal elders need a group of heroes led by a mighty champion, and they hope the barbarian is that champion. To prove he is up to the task, he must first complete 3 challenges by himself. So yes, Frozen Horror is one of 2 expansions that includes solo quests, the other being Mage of the Mirror. That doesn't mean you can play them without a Zargon player, it means they are designed, supposedly, for just one hero versus Zargon. It's a nice idea, including some missions you can play even when you can't get your full gaming group together. Of course, not everyone will be interested in those solo quests, so you can simply ignore them and start on quest 4 if you so wish. In this case, you just assume the barbarian has already proven his worth, so now the real quest can begin. Skipping these solo missions does mean you will miss out on some decent kit, a crossbow, a battle axe and more, but if you have already played through the core campaign, you are probably more than adequately tooled up by this stage anyway. Regardless, Quest 1 is Xanon Pass. The introductory text is addressed to the barbarian. He, or she if you're using the included female barbarian miniature, is told that servants of the Frozen Horror have overrun the fortress at Xanon Pass, which is the only way to pass over the Siberian range to reach Ice Mountain. The barbarian must find a way through the fortress to reach the other side. And already you may have noticed a sizable narrative blip. The barbarian isn't yet on the quest to fight the Frozen Horror. He is supposed to be proving his worth. You would think the tribal elders would have arranged some special quests to this end. Go and wrestle a bear, ascend the highest mountain peak and have a spitting contest with a Yeti. That sort of thing. Instead, this quest, and indeed the 2 following solo quests, feel like they would be part of the real mission. After all, why would the barbarian have to sneak through Xanon Pass to reach Ice Mountain if he's only going to have to sneak right on back to prove he did it and gather the other heroes to, what, sneak back through again with them? It just doesn't make sense, and from a narrative perspective, it bugs me. But as an introductory quest, this isn't too bad at all. It starts off in a pretty standard sort of way, a few orcs and goblins scattered around the place, but gradually it introduces new traps and new enemies. And something I particularly like is that depending on the route you take through the map, many of those traps and enemies can be avoided. It's possible to completely bypass the swinging axe traps, the polar warbear and the yeti. They are lurking threats, potential disasters, and it shows some restraint not to front load the first quest with everything the expansion has to offer. There's stacks of loot too, a longsword, a shield and some cash. And there's a neat scripted event where you meet a lone crossbowman, and if you charge into combat with him, he immediately surrenders and gives you the crossbow before running away. This is a neat little story beat that I feel a Zargon player could do a bit more with. I think it would be cool to give the player a choice here. Kill the crossbowman for his crossbow, or let him go free. Then maybe the crossbowman could join the barbarian as a mercenary for the rest of the quest, or you could have a scripted event later on where he runs to the barbarian's aid when things look dire. Quest 2 is Trial by Ice. Having made it through Xanon Pass, the barbarian is charged with infiltrating an enemy outpost to assassinate one of the Frozen Horror's lieutenants, Crag the Dread Warrior. Again, this feels like a mission that is too important to be used as a test. Taking out key military personnel to undermine the Frozen Horror's military might is an exciting idea, but it feels like part of the main quest line. This is also the first quest that really makes use of the expansion's setting. I have always felt that Frozen Horror, more than any other expansion, does a good job of making you feel like you are in a new environment, and Quest 2 is a great example. You start in an outside location, there is a freezing room that will sap your body points, slippery ice that can cause heroes to trip, an icy stream that slows movement to a crawl and which can prove deadly if heroes are exposed to the water for too long, and an ice tunnel that allows fast travelling between different areas of the map. This is all really, really good stuff. The quest is tough. In one room you will find slippery ice, a dread warrior and a yeti, and at one point you are asked to face 2 gremlins at once. Gremlins are way stronger than they should be, and they nick your stuff. One thing I do want to point out on this quest is the weird arrangement of spear traps in the top right. This does crop up from time to time and it does amuse me. That is a room designed by someone who completely forgot that you don't actually have to be in a space adjacent to a treasure chest in order to open it. The quest ends with a dust up with Crag, a buffed up dread warrior, and then it's on to Quest 3, the rescue. It turns out the tribal elder Gothar has been captured and the barbarian has to find him and bring him home. Again, this just doesn't fit right with the idea of solo challenges that have been set as tests. But never mind, this is the quest where the barbarian can find a battle axe and then heads really start flying. You can also find a helmet, so you can go full Arnie in Conan.
Do you want to live forever?
Well, this is the first mission where you might not. There are stacks of enemies and a tough final battle with orcs and dread warriors in a trapped room. After Quest 3, the rest of the gang can join the barbarian for the Glacial Gate, the first mission in the campaign proper. The introduction to this quest specifically lists the barbarian's allies as being a dwarf, an elf and a wizard. Really, this should have been changed. With this new edition of the Frozen Horror, Avalon Hill tried to be as faithful to the original as possible, and they were often faithful to a fault, recreating maps and situations without considering any changes, and even reusing the original wording for mission briefings. It's a small thing, but by the time their version of the Frozen Horror came out, Avalon Hill had already made new heroes and must have known even more were on the way. But now I am really nitpicking. The narrative for this particular quest couldn't be simpler. Infiltrate Ice Mountain and find a way to the inner chambers of the Frozen Horror's lair. But despite that simple concept, the quest is full of inventive scenarios, and should leave the heroes with no doubts about the challenge ahead. They will find a gremlin in a cage. If they decide to release it, the little git immediately steals an item from the heroes and runs away. There is an icy crevasse where a hero can plummet to their death instantly, there's an exploding treasure chest that inflicts damage on every hero in the room if it goes off, there's a slip and slide with a pit trap at the bottom, and then there's the room with 2 yetis and a warbear. You get a cool item for surviving that ordeal, but you're probably going to burn through healing potions. This is definitely the point where you realise this expansion may have introduced gremlins and yetis, but it was designed by trolls. Quest 5 is called the Deadly Depths, and it isn't kidding. Alarms are sounding throughout Ice Mountain, and many foes are awakening to hunt down the heroes as they try to find a way even deeper into the stronghold. This mission isn't fun, not how it's presented. Zargon will probably have to do a little work. It's a very long quest using every inch of the board, and there are numerous encounters that are a real slog. 3 gremlins in a corridor early on, a room with a gargoyle and 2 warbears, and most egregious, a room of frozen enemies that suddenly spring into life. 2 warbears, 2 gremlins, and 2 yetis. There are also many rooms that are mean without offering any kind of reward. Look at the whole bottom right quadrant of the map. It's a complete horror show with traps, warbears, and a chasm that instantly kills you if you fall in, and not a single treasure to be found. Not to mention the rooms are stuffed with traps, and to get out the heroes are forced to trudge through a long icy river, which slows movement to a crawl and has a 33% chance of inflicting a wound for each step heroes take while they are in it. A hero with the Ring of Warmth wouldn't worry too much about this, but to get that ring, they would have to go into the tomb in the bottom left of this map. Yeah, the one where there is an undead enemy standing on every single space except for the space that has a pit trap on it, which is the space directly behind the door. Weirdly, there is a boss in this mission, a Dread Warlock. You don't have to kill him, you can bypass his room completely and just leave. You don't even get a cool prize if you do kill him. This is one of those situations where it would have been good to have a choice. For example, the heroes can choose to avoid the conflict, but the Warlock will appear in a later mission if they do. Or they could kill the Warlock now and get a small prize for their efforts. This mission also features a couple of doors that vanish once the heroes pass through. An interesting idea that has no definable purpose in this particular quest. Quest 6 is the Frosted Path. The heroes must find their way through to go deeper into the lair. Again. This is another challenging mission, but not quite as bad as the last one. There's still loads going on though, and much of it is just horrible. There are yetis in corridors, which really sucks because of their hug ability. Personally, I think hug rules need to be completely rewritten. Plus there are lots of other tough monsters to fight, and the map layout forces the heroes to navigate an icy ledge where if they roll a double black shield, a 1 in 36 chance, they die instantly. But at least this mission offers lots of treasure. Cash, potions, spell scrolls, a longsword, and a crossbow. Quest 7 is the Halls of Calenos. In this mission the heroes must, you guessed it, go deeper into Ice Mountain. The twist here is that Calenos was a mighty barbarian who defeated the frozen horror last time he showed his ugly mug. Unfortunately, Calenos lost his life, and subsequently became a dread-powered barbarian zombie. He is protecting the Amulet of the North, which is an awesome trinket the heroes will want. And I love this. I love little reminders that there are other heroes in the world, and sometimes they come to tragic ends. It makes the world feel more real and lived in, like it isn't just reacting to what our heroes are doing. This should also get the heroes thinking. If they fail in their mission, they too could become undead minions of Zargon. It should be stressed though, the fight with Calenos is a bit of a pain. An undead barbarian, a gargoyle, 2 orcs, 2 dread warriors, a yeti and a warbear. It's a lot to deal with, and you better hope you have plenty of mercenaries to help you. This mission also introduces the Living Fog Room, which is packed with powerful enemies. Whenever a hero attacks one of those enemies, they first roll a combat dice, and if they roll a black shield or a skull, they have attacked a foggy apparition instead, and the attack is completely wasted. My advice, don't fight anything in the fog room. Lure those enemies out. If the heroes survive the encounter with Calenos, they can move on to Quest 8, the Search for the Scepter. The scepter is the source of most of the frozen horror's power, so the heroes have to find it and destroy it. There's not a lot to say here, this is just a grueling gauntlet. Almost every room is filled with enemies, so every combat drags on longer than it needs to. There are far too many doorways with traps just on the other side, and once again the heroes must encounter the possibility of instant death on an ice ledge. There are ice tunnels scattered all over the map, which is fun as you can teleport around, and the slip and slide makes another appearance. But it doesn't make up for the map being a bit too big for what it's doing and being a bit too much of a slog to fight through. The final battle for the scepter is one of those situations that sounds really cinematic. The heroes battle some of the toughest enemies in the game in a room where icicles are crashing down from the ceiling. Unfortunately, in reality, this is another drawn-out slugfest with some unfairly positioned traps. It's the sort of encounter that could be easily revamped with a bit of imagination. I love the idea of the fight happening in a room of dangerous icicles, but I would maybe grab a couple of d4s in different colours, rolling them at the start of each Zargon turn. The result of the first dice determines a row of squares in the room, the second dice determines a column of squares in the room, and Ice Shard falls where the row and column intersect, causing 1 body point of damage on anything there. A fun twist in this battle is that the heroes must destroy the scepter by attacking it. When they do this, it explodes, causing 2 points of body damage to everything in the room. That is a nasty surprise that could take out more than one badly wounded hero. I would drop a few hints about the scepter crackling with energy before the heroes do anything, and I would probably give them the chance to dispose of it by chucking it off the ice ledge instead of attacking it. But that's just me. Oh, it should also be noted that for this mission, triggering a wandering monster trap or pulling a wandering monster card will spawn 3 ice gremlins. That's ridiculous. In fact, in most of the Frozen Horror missions, the wandering monsters are ridiculous. Spawning 2 yetis or 2 polar war bears is a massive pain. Having destroyed the scepter, the heroes can move on to the final challenge, a massive double quest called the Heart of Ice. The idea is that the heroes begin on one level of the maze, find a staircase to a second level, hunt for a key, then return to the first level to use that key to unlock the Frozen Horror's throne room where they can instigate the final showdown. This setup requires 2 separate maps. When the heroes find the stairs leading down, you clear the current board layout to start exploring the second level. And of course, when the heroes return to the first level, you clear the board again. That's a bit of a pain to deal with, but if you happen to have 2 boards, for example you have the original core set and the new First Light core set, you can run both levels of the quest simultaneously, and save on a lot of sorting and tidying. The double quest is a cool concept, but it is massive. Whatever time you normally set aside for a game of HeroQuest, double it at least, and be prepared for this epic encounter to take up a big chunk of your game's evening, if not the whole evening. Unfortunately, as with a lot of the Frozen Horror, good ideas aren't implemented as well as they could have been. The way this quest runs, it didn't need to be multi-leveled. You could simply have had one quest where you hunt for the key, and then one quest where you enter the Frozen Horror's inner sanctum for the smackdown. It's just done this way to make it really long, so that it can sap all the heroes' resources before they fight the final boss. You have to do lots of exploration, and there are yet more huge battles. You will face most of the chilly hazards one final time, including ice vaults, ice streams, fog rooms, slippery ice patches, chasms, ice slides, various traps, and more monsters than you can shake a battle axe at. And then, finally, the heroes will face, and hopefully kill, the Frozen Horror. Personally, as much as I like the double quest idea, I would have looked at handling things differently, using the multi-tiered dungeon as a plot hook and as a way of defining an objective. I imagine a scenario where the heroes confront the Frozen Horror but realise they can't defeat him. He chases them around the upper maze until they find a way to the lower level. In the lower levels there are large supports which the heroes should destroy. Then they return to the upper floor and lure the Frozen Horror into the area where the supports were broken, causing him to crash through the floor and into the depths beneath the mountain. Or, you know, something like that. Nevertheless, if the heroes slay the Frozen Horror, they win. Hurrah! Mentor blows some smoke up your ass and says the barbarian will be remembered for generations to come, and then he drops a line about threats in other regions of the realm, and that's it, that's your lot. For me, Frozen Horror is a really strong expansion, with weak elements. A solid block of ice-cold awesomeness with some cracks showing. On the one hand, it does a fantastic job of setting the scene. No other expansion creates a new environment so well, not even Jungles of Deltharak. You really feel like you are in an alien setting, facing brand new challenges and deadly hazards. There are exciting new enemies, and you get to hire mercenaries to help you pound on those new enemies. Plus, the overall nature of the quest is neat. Who doesn't love a good old-fashioned monster hunt? But, conversely, the balance of the missions is off. Sometimes they seem unfairly difficult, and in the combat-heavy missions where you have to punch your way through many yetis and bears, they can really start to drag, which is something you never want from a game of HeroQuest. There is also a lack of set pieces. Think back to the chase in Keller's Keep as the heroes are hunted by orcs, or the rolling boulder trap, or the prison escape from Return of the Witchlord. In Frozen Horror we get lots of cool new hazards, pun intended, but not much in the way of scripted encounters after the confrontation with the cowardly crossbowman. And, most importantly, for me anyway, while the overall questline is fine, the storytelling is weak. If you look at something like the core game campaign, there is real excitement there, a sense of progression, interconnections that hint at deeper meanings and a web of storylines. And then there are real personal stakes as the heroes make a hash of things and then scrabble to correct their mistake. But here, the heroes enter Ice Mountain looking for a way down. Then they look for a way further down. And then they look for a way further down. And then they look for a way further down. this could have been handled differently. The plot points are simple. Heroes must destroy the scepter, then they can kill the frozen horror. Fine, but it doesn't take much to weave that into an engaging story. Imagine, the heroes don't know where the scepter is. They go to its initial resting place for clues. They find signs of a scuffle. Whoever was guarding the scepter has been taken prisoner. The heroes track the thieves to a nearby outpost. They rescue the prisoner who tells them where the scepter is being moved to. The heroes intercept the caravan transporting the scepter, only to find out it's a decoy, but they discover the scepter is with one of the Frozen Horror's generals. They track him down and destroy him, and then they destroy the scepter. Then they finally infiltrate Ice Mountain. They are discovered, and this sets off the alarm, leading to a frantic chase through the lower caverns, culminating in a battle to the death with the Frozen Horror. Something like that would keep me on the hook. However, Frozen Horror is classic and then storytelling. It lacks the emotional weight that you need to carry a campaign through. After all, part of the lure of a good campaign isn't just tough fights, but a real sense of challenge, escalating threat, and loss. Look at some of the best campaigns in HeroQuest. In the core set, the heroes fail multiple times, even if they complete a quest. They get captured, they steal Fool's Gold, and they unleash the Witch Lord on an unsuspecting world. Even in victory there are defeats, and that advances the plot and keeps the players engaged with the plight of their characters. That's the kind of storytelling that creates truly memorable adventures. All told, I do love the Frozen Horror. It's exciting, varied and inventive, with one of the best bosses in the game, and it's a great toolkit for anyone making their own adventures. I just wish Avalon Hill had taken the opportunity to spruce it up a little bit. As it is, I think this is a quest that is ideal for dabbling Zargons. You can add some set pieces, adjust the difficulty, restructure some of the maps, and have fun exploring the Northlands. But that is it from me for now. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please consider pressing the like button. If you really like this video, please consider subscribing if you don't already do so, and hopefully I will see you all again very soon. Bye bye everyone. Bye bye.